Why do investors keep throwing multi-million-dollar deals funding games that seem so obvious to fail by everybody looking at them? They keep funding the next Concord. And I'll actually explain why they're doing that in this video. This video is not about why did Highguard fail or why did Concord fail. It's about why investors keep funding this kind of live service slop that seems so obvious that it's going to fail. Are they stupid? And the answer is no, they probably expect them to fail because that's fine for their investment strategy. But what? Am I insane? Are they insane? No, it's because they're living in a power law curve. Venture capital investments work on a power law curve, and that guides their investment strategy. And so what the heck do I mean by a power law curve? So my math teacher side is going to be showing a little bit in today's video, but don't worry, there will be no test, there will be no homework, and there's actually maybe a little bit of homework. You should watch this Veritasium video if you're interested. You don't have to do it. But anyway, if you're living in a power law distribution, you behave very differently than if you're living in a normal distribution, at least if you're trying to make money off of the situation. So what do we mean by this? Well, let's take something like human height, which falls into a normal distribution. If you stack up all the people with the same height on top of each other, well, actually, probably not a good way of putting it, but if you map the frequency of people having a certain height, then you notice that most people are near the mean, the average. And then there's some outliers in both directions. But most people live pretty close to the mean, and none of the outliers are all that extreme. In other words, most people are actually pretty close to average height, and then even the outliers, like an 8-foot tall person, are not a crazy outlier like a 100-foot tall person or a 1,000,000-foot tall person. That just doesn't even make sense in that context. And since this is the way a lot of things work, this is the way a lot of people think. They think things work according to a normal distribution, and many things do, but many other things work according to a power law distribution. So if you had something distributed according to a power law, what you'll notice is that there's actually a large number of failures. And then there's a incredibly decreasing number of successes. How, if you think about, being taller as a success, we're going to be changing this to talking about money. So we'll think about these as successes. But the successes do keep going. There's no limit to them. And also the return on the investment is basically like you could go to infinity on this. That's what's going on if you're in a power law distribution. And I'm going to argue that a investment in a live service game is governed by power laws, like their likeliness to have a return, right? So if you don't think of this as height, and we ignore this normal distribution now, let's think about the return on the investment in a live service title, okay? So this is your return in dollars, and I now think that, our money here is like basically like the sky is the limit. Think about games like Fortnite that just endlessly print money. Now, the thing is that the games that do that are very few and far between. There's not a high density of them. In fact, there's a lot of games that launch, nobody likes them, and they instantly shut down. These are your Concords, and apparently now probably Highguard. Now, Highguard isn't completely shut down at this point, but we do have a lot of the staff being, fired, etc. So things aren't looking good. But this is just the latest example and what kind of spurred me to make this video talking about this. They're expecting failure on these investments because they don't need that many of them to succeed for it all to have been worthwhile to the investors. Now, I want to be clear right now that there is a difference between the investors and the game studio and the game developers. By all counts, it seems like the people involved in making games like Highguard and Concord thought the game was good and thought it would succeed or had a very high chance of succeeding. Actually, it's been really sad reading some of the posts from the people who were just laid off of the Highguard team at Wildlight, saying that they were so confident this game would succeed. And I don't want to get into why the game failed. Again, I just want to be clear that it's not the game developers or the game studios that are necessarily the ones thinking in the way I'm describing in this video. I'm talking about people who invest in games like this. The best way to play the game is to actually expect most of your investments to fail, but for the ones that return that insane amount to make everything worthwhile. So, do investments play out that way? Well, again, these charts are not about video game investments. This is about just venture capital investments in general. And the fact of the matter is that 6% of deals produce 60% of the returns, and half of them lose money. And like I said, all my sources will be linked in the video description. So the way you play the game of venture capital investing isn't to expect all of your investments to return money. You actually expect many or even more than half of them to fail to even break even. That's completely expected. The key to winning in this kind of a situation is to make lots of bets. So, top funds, more big hits, not fewer misses. It's not about avoiding misses, it's about trying to get more big hits. And the best way to do that is to make more deals, to make more investments, invest in more of the games, if we want to think about this as the live service games. Because if you look at the deals done, then if you look at it based on that the best way to make lots of return is to make lots of deals so that your share of deals that are the outliers, that make the crazy amount of money, make up a larger percent of your total revenue. If you look at this chart, what we're seeing here is that if you look at the aggregate return, a multiple by fund class, the more that they are, making these deals and getting these huge outlier successes, the more it just makes up an insane amount of their overall return. This is the correct way to invest if you are in a situation that is governed by a power law. So, are the investors stupid when they keep funding the next Concorde? Well, if they're right that this is a situation that is governed by a power law distribution, then they aren't stupid. They're only stupid if they're only investing in one of these games. That would be stupid. What would be actually the right way to make money in this situation would be to invest in tons of live service game development and expect most of them to shut down and not return any money. But if you can at least get one big winner, and the profit returns basically go to infinity, it more than makes up for everything else. Now, if you want to learn more about power law distributions and how to behave in this situation, like I mentioned earlier, there's a really good Veritasium video called, I guess I'm covering it up here, You've Likely Been Playing the Game of Life Wrong, that gets into this, because there's all sorts of situations that you wouldn't expect that do play into this. Like the same reason that people are investing in Concorde and Highguard also explains why forest fires work the way that they do. There's going to be lightning strikes, and they're going to light some fires. Some of them are going to burn like crazy, whereas others don't take off. This same math behind these power law distributions explain what's happening here, which is really interesting. So you could imagine every lightning strike in this simulation being funding a live service title. And many of them just kind of sputter out, right there. We're seeing these little strikes that hit and nothing happens. Some of them hit a little bit bigger and then fizzle out. But then sometimes the stars align and you'll get the whole screen to basically explode. And that made all of those failed investments completely worth it. The math teacher in me wants to start going into how on a log plot, you'll see a linear pattern if you're living in a power law situation, and get way more into this, but I'm going to rein myself in. I'm not a math teacher today. I'm doing my YouTube channel stuff, which is about games. So anyway, I know my videos are usually more about PC hardware, but I keep seeing so many comments about why do they keep funding stuff like this. Now, I also want to be clear that I actually don't know how the developer Wildlight was funded. I tried to research it. It said they were funded, but somebody's funding this stuff, right? So my suspicion, at least if they're being smart, is that the investors in Wildlight weren't only investing in Wildlight. They are probably investing in a bunch of other live service titles, and they're just needing one of them to light the entire forest on fire to make everything worthwhile, and they're not stupid. I hope you guys found the video interesting. This is not my normal style of video, but it's at least tangentially related to the channel, and I think it's an interesting math idea. So there you go. I hope all of you have an excellent day.